They're hungry for a discussion of the relationship between responsibility and meaning. We haven't had that discussion in our culture for 50 years. We've concentrated on rights and privileges and freedom and impulsive pleasure. They're shallow, and that's not good. If people are moored shallowly, then storms wreck them, and storms come along. I've been a clinician for a very long time, and I've tried to bring it all together and to make a case for the significance of individual life, the psychological necessity of courage and nobility and responsibility, these things that sound old-fashioned because they need to mature, they need to want to be adult, merely a consequence of the fact that YouTube skews so male. Our culture confuses men's desire for achievement and competence with the patriarchal desire for tyrannical power, and that's a big mistake. Those aren't the same thing, even a bit. So, and it's very inappropriate psychologically and sociologically to confuse them, because our primary social hierarchy structures are fundamentally masculine. A huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people who are on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who die in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men. It's like, where's the dominance here precisely? There's a lot of people, I would say, who are coming to listen to what I say because they're sick and tired of having their desire to move forward in the world and to achieve something and to take their place as adult males, let's say, who are under the weight of accusations that their ambition and forthrightness is a manifestation of something that's fundamentally tyrannical. They're not happy with that. It's not doing anyone any good, and it's also not true. It's really a terrible thing to do to young men, and it's happening all the time. That's why they're bailing out of universities like mad. There won't be a man left in the social sciences in 10 years in the universities, and it's no bloody wonder. It's an unhospitable place, and it's unhospitable precisely because of this doctrine. It said that throughout history, the fundamental relationship between men and women was one of power, essentially slavery. It's like, fine, believe it if you want. It's not going to do your relationships any good, I can tell you that. The fact that there's an unequal distribution, and the problem I have with it is that the reason that men are bailing out is because of the prevalence of the doctrine that you're espousing. That's the problem I have with it. It doesn't matter that much. They will bail out. I don't see any way that the universities are going to redeem themselves in the next decade. So, and maybe that will be fine, but I doubt it because it's too expensive and the universities are doing all sorts of things that aren't acceptable, mostly ratcheting up the price. So, and decreasing the quality of what they're offering and playing into the hands of the people who are ideological acolytes of the identity politics routines and playing postmodern stunts and pushing neo-Marxism and all these things that are characteristic of the social sciences and the humanities primarily. It's a much deeper problem than that. The doctrine that the best way to view history is as the domination of a tyrannical male patriarchy, and that's true also particularly of the West, which is a doctrine I find absolutely unpalatable and historically absurd, biologically ridiculous, and ungrateful, among other things. We live in the best society that's ever been created. How can it be good if it's the consequence of a tyrannical patriarchy? Tyranny isn't good, is it? I mean, that's the definition of tyranny, something that isn't good, and yet it's produced all these things that you're grateful for. Like, doesn't that contradiction bother you? Where did what was good come from? I used to wrestle with the kids, which of course can't do now because everybody knows that would just be a catastrophe. And I used to draw them pictures of monsters and they'd line up for that. And I liked working with kids quite a lot. And I didn't care whether it was female dominated. I've been female dominated my professions my whole life. Well, I've been criticized endlessly for 2 years. I've been in scandals. I've probably been in, I don't know how many scandals in the last 2 years. Like if you put up a post and 1,000 people read it, certainly 1,000 people won't respond. A few people respond. Well, maybe it skews way over to those people who had a bad day. Like we have no idea, right? I find the constant conflict exhausting. I'm trying to do everything I can to bring people who are trying to develop a vision for their life together and to encourage them to act more responsibly, but not in a finger-wagging sort of way, but because I've come to understand that the meaning that sustains you in life is mostly to be found through responsibility. And through the voluntary adoption of responsibility, you're very likely to find your fundamental strength. And I think that that's clinically unassailable observation. And so And that's all very good, and I'm very pleased to be doing it, and it seems to be having a salutary effect as far as I can tell. But it's not because I thrive on anger. The cultures can all be put together in a single place with no overarching structure or undergirding structures. That's not the case. How can that possibly be the case? That defines the situation in the world, and the world is full of war. So how can that possibly work? If you're going to bring people together and they're going to exist together in harmony, they have to be playing a game that everyone plays, that everyone knows the rules for. It can't be 10 different sets of rules for different people. That isn't going to work. So it's absolutely naive to believe. How, if that worked, the world wouldn't be full of war.